Princess Zuralin stood at the edge of the royal ballroom, watching the celebration that was supposed to be in her honor. All around her, dignitaries from across the Galactic Coalition mingled, danced, and conducted the subtle negotiations that masqueraded as social interaction. The event marked her 20th naming day, the traditional age when Velkhari royalty was presented to potential suitors from allied species. But no one was approaching her. Through the crowd she could see them, the young nobles and military officers, the diplomats' sons and merchant princes. They glanced her way occasionally, their eyes lingering on her orange skin before sliding away in barely concealed disdain. Some whispered behind their hands. Others simply ignored her presence entirely. Zira touched her blonde hair self-consciously, making sure it still fell properly around her shoulders. Her gown was perfection, midnight blue with silver threading that caught the light, tailored to emphasize her figure while maintaining royal dignity. Her violet eyes had been enhanced with subtle cosmetics. Everything about her appearance had been meticulously prepared. None of it mattered. "Smile, sister," a voice murmured beside her. Zira's younger sister, Myra, appeared at her elbow, her own orange skin unmarred by the scarring that covered Zira's left arm and shoulder. "You're supposed to be enjoying yourself." "Difficult to enjoy being invisible," Zira said quietly. Myra's expression softened with sympathy. "They're fools. The accident wasn't your fault. Fault doesn't matter, only perception." Zira watched another cluster of potential suitors deliberately angle their conversation away from where she stood. "I'm damaged goods, Myra. No amount of royal blood changes that. The accident had happened 3 years ago, a flyer crash during a diplomatic mission. Zira had been fortunate to survive, the physician said. The scarring from the energy burns could have been much worse. But in Velkhari culture, where physical perfection was prized above almost everything else, even minor scarring was enough to make someone unmarriageable. For a princess, it was catastrophic. "Mother's going to be furious," Myra said. "She spent months organizing this event. Then she should have had the physicians use synthetic skin grafts. I told her I didn't mind. You know why she refused. Grafts aren't natural. They would have made the scarring worse in the eyes of traditional families." Zira laughed bitterly. "So instead I stand here, perfectly scarred and perfectly alone." A sudden shift in the crowd's energy made her look up. The human delegation was arriving, later than fashionably appropriate but still within acceptable bounds. Zira's mother, Queen Velshara, greeted them personally, a courtesy that reflected the growing importance of human Velkhari relations. Humans were still relatively new to the coalition, barely 40 years since first contact. But they'd proven themselves valuable allies, particularly in military matters. Their unconventional tactics and adaptive thinking had helped resolve several border conflicts that had stymied coalition forces for years. The delegation consisted of 3 humans, an older diplomat, a younger attaché, and a military officer. It was the officer who caught Zira's attention. He was tall even for a human, perhaps 6'3", with the kind of build that spoke of both strength and endurance. His formal military uniform was crisp and proper, but he wore it with casual confidence rather than rigid formality. Dark hair, sharp green eyes, and a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. Battle-scarred, Zira realized, like her. "Stop staring," Myra hissed. "I'm not. You absolutely are, and he's noticed." Indeed, the human officer's eyes had found hers across the room. For a moment they simply looked at each other. Then he smiled, not the polite diplomatic expression most wore at these events, but something genuine, and started walking toward her. Zira's heart began racing. He was coming directly to her, ignoring the other nobles who tried to intercept him with conversation. His path through the crowd was purposeful, deliberate. "Princess Zuralin." He stopped in front of her and bowed with perfect coalition protocol. "I'm Captain Marcus Drake, military liaison with the Terran delegation. Would you honor me with this dance?" The ballroom seemed to pause. Conversations faltered. Eyes turned toward them. A human officer asking a scarred Velkari princess to dance when dozens of better options surrounded them. Zira found her voice with effort. "Captain Drake, you should know that I'm not. That is, there are other princesses who might be more suitable." "I'm not asking them," he said simply, extending his hand. "I'm asking you." Something in his tone, in the directness of his gaze, made her decision for her. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, and let him lead her to the dance floor. The music was a traditional Velkari composition, slow and elegant. Marcus adapted to the rhythm immediately, guiding her through the steps with surprising grace. "You dance well for a human," Zira said, aiming for light conversation to cover her nervousness. "I studied coalition cultural protocols extensively. Dancing is part of that." He smiled. "Though I'll admit I expected you to be taller. Intelligence briefings had you listed at 6'2". "That's Myra, my younger sister. I'm only 6 feet even." "Ah, in that case the briefings also described you as unmarked and traditionally beautiful. Since you're clearly not unmarked, I'm guessing they got other things wrong too." Zira tensed, waiting for the polite withdrawal, the diplomatic excuse. "The accident. Looks like it was painful," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "Energy burns." "Yes. A flyer crash 3 years ago. I got mine from shrapnel during the Proxima Station conflict." He tilted his head slightly, indicating his facial scar. "Debris from an exploding bulkhead. The medic said I was lucky it missed my eye." Zira stared at him. "You're not bothered by my scarring." "Why would I be? It's just evidence that you survived something dangerous." His expression was genuinely puzzled. "Or is this a Velkari cultural thing I'm missing?" "Physical perfection is highly valued among my people. Scarring is considered," she struggled for the right word, "unfortunate. It makes marriage alliances difficult." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," Marcus said bluntly. Zira couldn't help it. She laughed. Actually laughed for the first time in hours. Captain, you can't say that about our cultural values. Why not? If a cultural value is objectively stupid, calling it stupid seems appropriate. He spun her gently in time with the music. You survived a crash that could have killed you. That speaks to strength, resilience, survival instinct. Those are valuable traits. Anyone who can't see that because of some aesthetic preference is too shallow to deserve your time anyway. You're very direct for a diplomat. I'm not a diplomat, I'm a soldier. They brought me along to provide security and look impressive in uniform. Actual diplomacy is handled by ambassador tours. He nodded toward the older human still conversing with the Queen. I'm just here to smile, nod, and try not to cause an interstellar incident. And asking a rejected princess to dance doesn't qualify as an incident. Are you rejected? Or have they just failed to recognize value when they see it? The dance ended, but Marcus didn't release her hand immediately. Princess, I realize we've only just met, but would you be willing to show me the royal gardens? I understand they're supposed to be spectacular, and I'd appreciate a guide who knows them well. It was a transparent excuse to continue their conversation privately. It was also completely improper. A princess didn't wander off alone with a foreign military officer at her own naming day celebration. Zira glanced around the ballroom. Her mother was deep in conversation with the human ambassador. The nobles who'd ignored her all evening were now watching with barely concealed shock that the human had chosen her over more suitable options. The gardens are indeed spectacular, she said. This way, Captain. The royal gardens were a masterpiece of living architecture. Bioluminescent plants from a dozen worlds arranged in patterns that shifted color with the time of day. At night, like now, they glowed in shades of blue and purple that seemed almost otherworldly. Marcus walked beside her along the stone paths, his hands clasped behind his back, studying everything with genuine interest. "This is incredible," he said, pausing to examine a cluster of flowering vines that pulsed with soft light. "We have nothing like this on Earth. Our gardens are beautiful, but they don't perform. These are cultivated over generations," Zira explained. "Each plant is selected not just for appearance, but for how it interacts with its neighbors. The whole garden is essentially one living organism. Like a military unit," Marcus mused. "Individual elements working together to create something greater than the sum of parts. That's an unusual comparison. It's how I think." He smiled apologetically. "Everything becomes a tactical metaphor eventually. Occupational hazard." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Zira asked, "Why did you ask me to dance, Captain? And please don't say it's because I'm beautiful or some diplomatic courtesy. I can see through that." Marcus considered his answer carefully. "Honest truth. Because you were the only person in that ballroom who looked like they understood what it meant to survive something that changed them. My scarring isn't just physical, is it?" He met her eyes. "I saw how you stood there, Princess, watching everyone pretend you didn't exist. putting on a brave face while being systematically rejected by people too blind to see what they were missing. That kind of pain, it leaves scars even if they don't show on the skin. Zira felt her throat tighten. You saw all that from across a ballroom. I'm a soldier. Reading people is part of survival, and I recognized what I saw because I've felt it myself. He leaned against a garden wall, his expression distant. After Proxima Station, after I was injured and spent 6 months in medical rehabilitation, I came home to a hero's welcome. Medals, ceremonies, public recognition. But the people who knew me before, friends, family, they looked at me differently, like I was broken, like the scar meant I was damaged. Were you? Yes, but not in the way they thought. I was changed, not ruined. There's a difference. He looked at her directly. You're changed too, princess. But from what I've seen tonight, you're not ruined. You're just surrounded by people too limited to recognize the difference. Zira had to look away, afraid she might actually cry. No one had spoken to her like this since the accident, like she was still a person of value, still someone worth knowing beyond political utility. Captain Drake, Marcus, please. We're in a garden having a private conversation. I think we can dispense with titles. Marcus, then, I need to know, is this genuine? Or is this some kind of political strategy, befriending the rejected princess to gain favor with the queen? He laughed, though without mockery. Princess, if I wanted to gain political favor, I'd be in there dancing with your sister or any of the other nobility, choosing you over them. That's the exact opposite of strategic. He sobered. This is genuine. You're interesting, intelligent, and you've survived something that would have broken weaker people. That makes you worth knowing, regardless of politics. You're either very sincere or an exceptional liar. I'm terrible at lying, actually. It's why I'm a soldier instead of a diplomat. They talked for over an hour, wandering through the gardens. Marcus asked about her interests, her studies, her work in Velkari humanitarian programs. He shared stories about Earth, about humanity's chaotic integration into galactic society, about his own military service. The conversation flowed naturally, easily, without any of the forced formality that characterized most royal interactions. When they finally returned to the ballroom, the celebration was winding down. Queen Velshara intercepted them immediately, her expression unreadable. Captain Drake, I trust my daughter provided an adequate tour of our gardens. More than adequate, Your Majesty. Princess Zuralin is an excellent guide and fascinating conversationalist. I'm grateful for her time. The Queen's eyes flickered to Zira, then back to Marcus. Indeed, Captain, would you and your delegation be available for a private audience tomorrow morning? There are matters I'd like to discuss. Of course, Your Majesty, we're at your disposal. After the human delegation departed, the Queen turned to Zira with an expression that mixed surprise and calculation. Well, she said quietly, that was unexpected. The next morning's audience turned into the first of many meetings. Marcus returned to the palace daily, ostensibly for diplomatic discussions, but he always made time to speak with Zira. Sometimes they walked in the gardens, sometimes they shared meals, sometimes they simply talked in the palace library while Marcus pretended to research Velkari culture. The court noticed. How could they not? The human warrior who'd chosen the scarred princess over all other options, who kept choosing her day after day. The same nobles who'd rejected Zira now whispered about political alliances and human influence. Some suggested Marcus was playing a long game, positioning himself for advantage. Others claimed he was simply too alien to understand proper Velkari aesthetics. Zira tried not to care what they thought. "They're saying you're using me," she told Marcus one afternoon as they sat by a garden fountain. "Using you for what? I'm a military officer, not a diplomat. I have no political power to leverage." "Then they're saying you pity me." Marcus set down the book he'd been reading, a collection of Velkari poetry Zira had recommended, and looked at her seriously. "Do I seem like someone who does things out of pity?" "No," Zira admitted. "You seem like someone who does things because they make tactical sense." "Exactly. And spending time with you makes perfect tactical sense." "How?" "Because you're intelligent, well-educated, politically connected, and you understand your society in ways an outsider never could. Talking with you has taught me more about Velkari culture than months of formal briefings. You're a valuable resource." He paused. "You're also funny, kind, and you don't treat me like either a curiosity or a threat, which is refreshing. So tactically and personally, knowing you is beneficial." "That's very practical." "I'm a practical person." He smiled. "Though I'll admit there's one aspect that's not particularly practical." "What's that?" "I'm starting to fall in love with you." Zira's heart stopped. "Marcus, I know it's complicated. Cross-species relationships are already difficult, and I'm human and you're royalty, which adds layers of diplomatic complexity. Plus, we've only known each other 3 weeks, which by anyone's standard is rushing things." He met her eyes. "But I don't believe in hiding the truth, even when it's inconvenient." "I'm falling in love with you, Zira, and I thought you should know." Zira stood up, her mind reeling. 3 weeks. She'd known him for 3 weeks, and he was, "Say something," Marcus said quietly. "Even if it's to tell me I'm an idiot and I've misread everything." "You're not an idiot," Zira said. "You're terrifying, terrifying. You say exactly what you mean. You don't play games or hide behind protocol. You just," she gestured helplessly, "state your feelings like you're reporting facts." "Would you prefer I be less direct?" "No, it's just, no one has ever." She stopped, collecting herself. "Marcus, I'm a scarred Velkari princess. My own people consider me unmarriageable. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone, I want you. You barely know me. I know you're brilliant at xenobiology and terrible at strategy games. I know you love poetry but hate most music. I know you work with refugee children because you remember what it felt like to be powerless and hurt. I know you pretend to be confident, but you're constantly afraid people will see through the act." He stood and walked to her. "I know that when you laugh genuinely, it sounds like music. And I know that spending time with you is the best part of every day I've been on this planet." Zira felt tears threatening. "This is impossible." "Why?" Because you're human and I'm Velkari. Because there are political implications and cultural barriers and 1,000 reasons why. Do you love me? The question cut through her spiral of panic. Zira stared at him, at this human warrior who'd chosen her when everyone else had turned away, who'd spent 3 weeks simply being present and genuine and impossibly, terrifyingly honest. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe I think so." Marcus smiled gently. "That's enough. We'll figure out the rest as we go." 6 months later, Zira stood in the same ballroom where she'd first met Marcus, watching another celebration. This one was for the formal announcement of her engagement to Captain Marcus Drake of the Terran Coalition Forces. The court had been scandalized. A Velkari princess marrying a human. It was unprecedented, improper. Several noble families had formally protested. Queen Velshara had listened to their complaints, then approved the marriage anyway. "My daughter deserves happiness," she'd announced publicly. "And Captain Drake has proven himself worthy through action, not just words. Any who question this union may take their concerns to me personally." No one had. Now Marcus stood beside Zira, his hand warm in hers, as dignified from across the coalition offered their congratulations. The same nobles who'd rejected her now praised her strategic alliance. The same families who'd whispered about her scarring now called her marriage progressive and forward-thinking. "They're all hypocrites," Zira murmured. "Completely," Marcus agreed cheerfully. "But useful hypocrites. Let them pretend they supported this all along. It makes the politics easier. You've become very diplomatic. I've had an excellent teacher." He squeezed her hand. "Though I'm still terrible at lying, so don't expect miracles." Across the room, Myra caught Zira's eye and smiled. Her younger sister had been one of the first to support the engagement, declaring loudly that if the court couldn't see Zira's value, they deserved to lose her to humanity. "Are you happy?" Marcus asked quietly. Zira looked at him. This man who'd chosen her when she'd been invisible, who'd seen strength in her scarring instead of shame, who'd stated his love like it was an obvious fact rather than an impossible dream. "Terrifyingly happy," she said. "Good, because I plan to keep you that way for the next 60 or 70 years minimum." "Only 60 or 70, how unambitious." "I'm being conservative, don't want to overpromise." Zira laughed, the sound genuine and free, and pulled him into a dance. Around them, the Velkari court watched and whispered and pretended they'd always known she was worthy. But Zira didn't care what they thought anymore. She'd been rejected by her own people, considered damaged and unmarriageable, invisible in a room full of potential suitors. Until a human warrior had looked past the scars and seen her. And that had made all the difference.